Whenever you hit those walls of resistance, the fear of failure, fear of being seen, the imposter syndromes, that is the work of the ego. Not because it's your enemy, but because that is its main function, its purpose, to keep your physical survival safe.
Somewhere beyond the ego mind, divine presence is always now.
What is the ego and why is it stopping you from shining online?
Morning pages, I'm doing it the artist way, where I switch to different bridges.
When you hear the word ego, let me ask you, what is the first things that pops up in your mind? What is the ego to you? The first time when I heard that term, I was like, ego means being selfish, and I don't want anything to do with it. But what I understood when studying and researching different types of signposts regarding spiritual awakening, I started to understand that the ego is not what I thought it was. The ego is just a function that comes with your current vehicle that you are equipped with for this life journey. And that vehicle is your body and your mind. And we all know that the mind, and in this case, the brain, has different functions. It constantly scans for potential threats, and the ego is a result of that program. The ego's function is to keep our physical survival unthreatened at all costs. And if you're here, I bet that chances are that you have already flirted a little bit with the idea of starting to share your ideas, your perspectives, and whatever you feel pulled toward to create online. And whenever you hit those walls of resistance, the fear of failure, fear of being seen, the imposter syndromes, that is the work of the ego. Not because it's your enemy, but because that is its main function, its purpose, to keep your physical survival safe. And the ego loves to identify, to sort, to scan your environment for those potential threats. But when we let it work unnoticed, that is when it gains all its power. That is when it projects all those very strong emotions, like completely panic of the very idea of speaking on a camera online, even though you know intellectually that it will not kill you. It doesn't. It is not a real threat. But the emotion is so strong because the ego has probably built on that programs for years. And the thing with the mind is that it's very clever. It's, I would say, one of the most resourceful instruments that we have, but it also not that smart because it runs on autopilot programs. Because the mind, the brain wants to save energy. That's why it creates habits for us. If we do something enough, then the mind turns that into a program so that we don't have to use a lot of energy each time we want to get dressed. We don't have to focus our thoughts thinking, okay, how will I actually do this? You know that by default. And the mind, the ego mind identity also creates those patterns, these default patterns. And the more we let it run unnoticed, the more power it will gain. Hence that is the reason why it can feel completely undoable to actually take that step, starting to following that desire within you to express, to share, to tap into the potential that we hear about all the time, the potential and the dimension we call the internet. And I think that many people, especially if you are watching this video, you feel this pull towards creating, to share, to express online. But simultaneously, many feel terrified of being seen. Why is that? Well, that's the work of the ego. Because even when you get to the point, maybe this sounds familiar. First, you get inspired by all the signposts out there. There's other creators sharing their journey, showing us what is possible. And that starts to awake something within us. The desire to create, the desire to tap in to infinite potentials that are promised to us. Because that's the thing. We are infinite beings, and therefore it's natural to us to recognize that. But the very thing that gets in our way to follow that path, to follow that vibrant guidance from within, is the blockages from the ego that projects, that puts up all these walls of fear, imposter syndrome, fear of being cringe, fear of being misunderstood, fear of provoking somebody else. And some of the most common fears the ego creates when we want to start posting online, especially when we already have gone and moved closer to that decision. We are so close a decision, or we have already taken it like, yes, I will do this. Then the ego trick us into the next trap. When we hear the voice of the fear of being seen, the fear of failure, but our inner light is stronger and more vibrant than those shadows, then the next trap is the need for validation. Okay, so you're going to post online. Well, do so if you want to, but you better do it good. You better get those views. And that is when we start to seek the guidance from goals and outside results rather than the inner journey, the inner transformation, the inner joy, the inner state of play. And here is the real tricky part. How to tell the difference between your intuition, that vibrant joy from within, versus the ego, the sometimes equal loud voice telling you not to. I would say that the distinction is actually pretty easy to detect once you learn this. Whenever something feels good, in a way, it can be joy, excitement, passion, harmony, serenity, peace, fulfillment. That is a sign that that flow of energy derives from the divine source that is you, your infinite being. And any negative emotion is a construction of the ego, the fear, the pain, the panic. And even if this is very simple, I know it's easy to reject, especially when the painful negative gets so loud. That's why it takes practice. Knowing isn't enough. Well, knowing is enough if you allow it to be your compass. Knowing from within, that means. But knowing on an intellectual level, you are still operating here. And when we are operating only through our mind without the fuel from our spirit, that is when the ego can create its own program and let them run on default, keeping you stuck. And the way to practice this is to do the classical manifestation practices. If you're new to it, it's about tapping in to the vibrant joy as much as you can by visualizing it, you can write affirmations, but whatever technique you use, it's not about the technique, it's about feeling it, bringing that joy within you that the mind translates to some kind of future outcome and bring that into the present moment. And all this talk about the ego, it sounds like it's this nasty character, the devil in our mind, but it has a function. But the reason why it's actually trying to, quote, protect people by convincing us not to post, not to create, or sharing our voice is once again just a function of the ego. The ego thrives on identification. It identifies with good or bad. That's why it creates these different types of labels of you. Whenever you state, I'm not good enough to do this, or even the positive labels you have on yourself, like, I am this great writer, or I am this wonderful mother, or whatever it is. But here's the thing. Whenever you feel that you are, I am, ending up with some kind of fixed description of you, that is an identity created by your ego. And whenever you try to break the walls from that identity, the ego views it as potential danger, because the ego views anything that is unknown, unfamiliar, as potential threat. And if you recognize yourself in this, that you have been thinking, overthinking that is, for many months now, maybe years, without taking any actual action. Maybe you have even come up to this step where you have decided, okay, I will start my YouTube channel, or I will start to write on Substack and start to explore different formats of writing and share my ideas. But still, you don't post it. That is the ego's need for validation. The ego don't understand the present moment, or rather the present moment is the biggest threat of the ego, because whenever you are present enough, you remove the blockages of the ego. Therefore, it creates those illusions that you cannot do something just for the fun of it. You cannot create a YouTube video just because you enjoyed it. What is the real goal? What is the potential consequences? And what are the potential wins? The ego doesn't understand or agree to the act of play and enjoying life. That's why we constantly strive for that next goal in order to gain that happiness, to gain that outside success that we believe is the thing that will make us happy. But the outside success is just the result of you thriving on the inside. And if I could give you one tips, this is what I would want you to do, is to come up with your first 10 pieces of content, whatever your format currently are, if it's writing or if it's videos. Because instead of focusing on that one step to be the giant step, the step that will change everything, you allow a path, a journey for growth. Because the thing is, perfection is just another trap created by the ego to keep us stuck. Because there is no such thing as perfection. It's just a concept, because we are constantly evolving, and evolving has no finish line. It's a work in progress. And by acknowledging that the journey includes steps, and that the steps are something that you should enjoy while taking them, you remove parts of the ego's power. Because the ego will tell you this first video or this first article needs to be perfect. You need to show everything you know. You need to show everything you can. Because the ego's trick from hindering you to take any step outside your current comfort zone is to make you believe that this step has to be so perfect. But the thing is, the only way to grow and evolve is to allow quantity. You will not get to Thailand by just taking one step. It requires many, 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 many steps in order for you to go there, depending on where on this planet you are at. But I think you get what I mean. And I cannot stretch enough how important imperfection is in your creative journey, because imperfection is not a limitation. It is a permission slip. It is the permission for you to grow, evolve, and more than that, to enjoy every step in whatever direction you are going. And I think that whenever you wait to feel ready, or wait for that perfect moment, or waiting for your talents to grow before actually taking any bold action, because that is, I think, what is required. The bold action is sharing the beauty that you carry within. And that is also, the bold action is also the liberation from the ego. Because when you realize that maybe this is messy, maybe this is cringy, but I don't care because I enjoyed creating it. And my intention is to allow it to serve somebody else, whomever that is. And to anyone that believes that your voice doesn't matter, your story or your perspectives is not any good to anybody else, because there are already so many creators on Loud, because there are so many other creators online, try to look at this from this perspective. The online space is a manifestation of a new dimension. We have the physical dimension that you and I are in right now. We are experiencing the physical dimension, but we also have the internet dimension, which in a way is a manifestation of the endless dimensions within every one of us. But if you, for a moment, would look at the physical world, would you say that it is too crowded, that half of the people of the planet have nothing to offer because there are so many ready in the world? Would you say that your friend's job, whatever that is, if she's a nurse or a teacher or plumber, I don't know, that it doesn't matter to anyone because there are already so many because there are so many nurses or teachers already? I bet you not would view it like that. And that's the same in the online space. It doesn't matter how many creators already there. Everyone has value to offer. But the only way to tap into any real value is when we leave the roles, the identity, the labels, and actually start to share something from within. And that doesn't have to reflect what you're giving on the outside in a specific image. It only means that your energy is there. When you feel good creating, when you feel good, when you feel positive energy in what you give away, that means it carries value, real value. So whenever, or if you ever feel that there's too many creators online already, do the reframing question. Is there too many people in this world already? Would you say that half of them doesn't matter? No. So take that perspective with you when you're entering the online dimension. And just let me give you a little glimpse of my own story. When I started this YouTube channel, I was not even consciously aware of the fear that my ego was projecting. I thought I didn't have any fear, but, well, I learned it. And I learned it because I challenged the ego. And I remember when starting this, I felt brave enough to go messy. And I'm still messy. And to be honest, I love to be messy. But before I have uploaded at least my first 10 videos, I felt so cringe in a way that I didn't thought I would. I felt like my messiness was the biggest hindrance for me to get better. And my ego told me, like, this is too messy. You will never get any better at this. And here's the thing. I would say that personally, I feel that I have gained some more abilities, but the real gain, I would say, is that even still up to this date, when I post my messy videos, I don't second guess it once. I never question, should I post this? And that is my biggest win. I don't even hear that voice regarding that area in a way from my ego anymore, because that part of the ego is dead. And that is true liberation. That is true freedom. And before we leave this conversation, what I really hope you take with you is the deeper realization that the ego is not you. It is a function of your equipment, and it will try to hinder you, and it will feel like you, but there is a way to liberate from it. And the only way to liberate from the ego is stop waiting. Because the longer you wait to follow your dreams, to share your content and share your shine online, the longer you wait, the more time and room the ego gets to thrive. So for each time you wait, your ego will build an even louder voice trying to stop you. But by taking actions, messy actions, that is the opposite of the ego's constraints and limitations. Taking messy actions is the allowance from your inner spirit. And that is the compass you should always follow. Hope you found any value in this. And if you like this kind of vibe and content, subscribe to the channel and visit me on Substack and subscribe to my newsletter there. Hope to see you soon again.
I'm back at the crime scene and uncomfortable with silence. I don't feel no shame anymore. Other egos place out as I switch to different bridges, as I lean to the void of silence. The anger and the actions are gone. Peace of forgiveness is taking place. Somewhere beyond the ego mind, divine presence is always now. I was seeking for a quiet space and I found it in my morning pages. I'm doing it the artist way, where